Welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. Today we have special guest Chad Ressler, which we're really excited about because Chad has been submitting all of these great stories and questions for the past several weeks, really since we started the podcast, I think. And so, so welcome, Chad.
Thanks. Good to be here.
One of our super fans, and he's not only helping out us by giving us lots of great feedback and help, and also places where we can improve as well, but also he's giving lots of user generated content to help other users. So thank you for that, first of all, Chad. Stories.
Oh, no problem.
I think your stories are pretty much all on, scenes or whatever content you put in, it's all on point pretty much, and it's you get it, you get the course, and you got it from the early days, right? I mean, I had to get the concept of a memory palace down, how to make the scenes, props, actors, all of that. So it's kind of getting my feet wet there in the beginning. I think even Phil critiqued a few of my early ones, like From.
Right, yeah.
With Christopher Walken and The Walker.
Yeah.
But listening to those critiques and stuff helped me to become a little bit better at this process.
Yeah, it's definitely useful to get the feedback from other people, and I know that simply because I had Luke in the beginning. Like, we would talk about our different scenes, and that was just one other person, using a technique that is not as developed as the Mandarin Blueprint Method is. So now we got, obviously we answer questions, but also this user-generated content. So it's quite helpful. You've actually been directly even replying to people sometimes with suggestions, which is great. So,
and we're always, I'm always very apprehensive about critiquing, because you're already doing so well, and I feel like I'm worried that some people might be like, well, hey, I'm already doing really well. Why do you have to be like, oh, this could be slightly better, or this could be slightly better? It's like,
right.
I'm glad that you get the fact that we're just giving general guidelines as to what would help certain people, but we always try and add the caveat of like, this, as long as it works for you, this specific scene, then that's fine.
Right.
Just for perpetuity. Yeah.
I mean, the critiques are good. I think even, if I was on character, 300 and I submitted a scene and you guys were like, well, this is good, but, maybe add this or add that. I think there was a couple times there were some critiques, and then, I read some of the scene examples, and I'm going to put them into scenes in the future where, similar props being used, and it really does help. I mean, you have to be willing to continue to learn, especially with the memory palace, and until you really get it. And I'm not even close to really getting it yet.
I think you get a lot of it.
I think you're very close, actually. I agree with you there. I think you're doing really, really well.
Well, before we get too far,
I feel like we've jumped the gun here, because first is for the listeners and the watchers, we want to know. Could you just give them a brief introduction? Like, who are you? How did you, and what was the problem that you were facing that caused you to search for a Chinese course, or like, where did you hear about us and that sort of thing? So, okay. So first of all, self-introduction, please. Who are you?
Well, obviously you already gave my name. My name's Chad Ressler. I'm from Pennsylvania in the United States. I'm engaged. I have 2 kids. My family's very supportive. I am actually an auto technician for Walmart. Just want to give a shout out to Junior, Ty, and Aaron. I promised them I would. And as for learning Chinese, it was something I wanted to do some years ago. That never really got any traction. And then it was about the end of December this year. I was talking to my fiance. Big fan of Kung Fu. I've seen all the movies. And I was just like, I was watching some. They were in Mandarin. And I was like, that's such a beautiful language. I wonder if I could learn that.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that'd be a great thing to try. So I did the typical buy textbooks, buy some diagrams, buy some flashcards, thought that was how I had to start. And I'm like, well, I know I'm going to need a program. I know I'm going to need some structure, even though it's going to be self-study. That's when I started getting online and looking at different programs. I don't know how many I looked at, quite a few. And I was actually doing a free trial of one program and came back to the Mandarin Blueprint. That's when I saw Luke's sort of introductory video where he's sitting on the bench and he's speaking Chinese, and I mean, he's really fluent. And I'm like, you know, this guy looks like he knows what he's doing. Maybe I had to give them a shot. So I remember talking to my fiance about it, and I said, you know, I think I need to try this. To be perfectly honest, I was skeptical. I didn't believe the claim.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm going to learn this much in 3 months. There's no way this is going to work. It's completely antithetical to everything I've done. I have 2 master's degrees, so I'm well-versed in traditional methods of learning. Well, I started the free trial, and I think it was probably, I don't know, I might have been 5 or 6 characters in. That was it. I was hooked. In fact, I think I sent an email. I'd been telling my fiance about the course. And I said, yeah, I learned this word today. I learned this new character today. And you know what? I couldn't remember it. And so we're driving, and I thought about the scene that we had to create for it. And I'm like, wait a minute, that was G, and then here's the ending. And these were the props. I'm like, oh, yeah. And right then, that day, I paid for it.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
That's how I got started with the Mandarin Blueprint.
That's awesome, man. Thank you. And also, I remember, didn't you comment about that little sort of epiphany moment? Or was it someone else?
Yeah, it was Gary Oldman in my father-in-law Ed's backyard. It was individual measure word. Yeah. And I was telling her about it, and I said, I can't remember this. I'm like, wait a minute, but I remember Gary Oldman in Ed's backyard, and there was an umbrella, and it was just a unique bedazzled umbrella among all these black ones. I'm like, oh yeah, it's individual.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm sold. Here's my credit card info.
Yeah.
Your story sounds actually very similar to my own, because I was interested in martial arts. I did it all through my teens. Kung fu specifically, actually Shaolin martial arts, Wing Chun, all that sort of stuff. And that was what sparked my interest. And I'd paint Chinese characters on the wall and stuff like that. That was what led me to go to China when I was like 19. And also, the same thing. I got a textbook, of course. Struggled. Thought I was just rubbish at languages. And then I sort of went out and started searching online for stuff. So I sort of stumbled across it and figured it out.
So I mean, Chinese is a lot different than Spanish, French, where, you know, you're going to have that alphabet you're familiar with. It's not going to seem as daunting. You look at Chinese and it's like, well, there isn't even an alphabet. So it looks a lot harder really than it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that's the biggest challenge of Chinese for sure, is definitely the characters right at the beginning. But just before we kind of so one of the things I'm wondering about is, apart from just sort of interest in the language as it is and the interest in Kung Fu, which made you sort of realize that the language was beautiful, as you put it, and I agree. But is there any other motivation driving you? Is there anything you're planning on doing with being able to speak Chinese, or it's just pure about the language?
No, it's about the language. That's it. I mean, not just about the language. Obviously, you want to learn more about the people, the culture, their history. I mean, even if you only watch maybe some historical movies, I mean, it's just a rich history. They have a very long history that I think a lot of people in the West probably don't even understand.
Yeah, it's a little bit tough to kind of put yourself in that mindset to realize it's like, oh, well, this entire, I mean, I don't even think that they really think of themselves, saying that China is a country is not even the best word. It's really more of a civilization. It's like, that's the way they do themselves.
Exactly.
Great civilization, you know?
That's right. And there's often you often get from certain foreigners, and they'll be like, well, China doesn't have 5,000 years of history. They're talking rubbish, because that's what they always tend to say, but it just doesn't translate very well, I don't think. What they're talking about is their culture, their cultural history, which is undeniably incredibly old and deep, and it's lasted well until today, even despite the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, if anything, the Cultural Revolution is a testament to how strong their culture is. The fact that it survived, sort of an intentional path to destroy it, but it still didn't. It still survived. So
it's amazing.
In fact, I watched the documentary, and it kind of chronicled this family that was able to recover like a few, like almost like 1,000 years worth of their history, even after Mao's Cultural Revolution kind of tried to erase all of it. That this guy he lived in America, but he went back to China and he recovered years of his family's history,
like relics and things from his ancestors.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And they had generations and generations of their family. Like, in America, we'd have a family reunion, but I mean, it was massive. They tracked all these people down. It was crazy.
Yeah. I'm really curious, after talking about all this, like, what about if you actually, not if, it's more like when you actually succeed with Chinese and you become fluent and literate, what will that mean for you? And what will you do with it, if anything? I mean,
honestly, I don't know. It's for me. I'll be able to sit and relax and watch a Chinese movie without having to read subtitles anymore. I'll just understand it.
Or you'll be reading the Chinese subtitles.
Right? Yeah. I'll move on to that. Maybe if people want to learn Chinese, I'll be glad to help them learn. But mostly it's just for me. I mean, I would like to eventually, make some friends, maybe from China, especially with, technology now. You can, chat with people and get to know people and actually learn a little bit more about the culture, But mainly it's just for me. If a job opportunity were to present itself, certainly I would, do something like that, but that's not my main goal. It's just simply for me.
Well, you'll find that I think that's a really good starting point. I think that if someone's just, okay, I'm really interested in this, it seems just a pretty language, and I think it will give me access to an interesting culture. I think that's the best, or one of the best reasons for learning anything. And
right.
I
think it would be very difficult, I think, to learn Chinese if you're being forced to learn it, or if you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to learn this. I have to get this job, or I have to get this promotion. So I just have to learn it. I think you're going to miss out on quite a bit.
We always say that, that's exactly right, because we always talk about try to enjoy the journey of it. If you don't enjoy the journey of it, you'll never enjoy it. Because once you're in Chinese, if that's just your goal, I want to be fluent so I can, I don't know, get a job or show off at a party or something, or then you're not going to know you're fluent. You're not going to enjoy the moment when you are, because you'll just be you. But if you don't, so that's why you must enjoy the journey.
And I think especially with the Mandarin Blueprint, in fact, you just said something. I guess I didn't realize until we were talking about this, but on your page, you're like, you can acquire as much as 80% of Chinese in 3 months. People are going to read that and think it's crazy. But you know what? If you're somebody who is like, I have to learn this, I got to get this now, I need it, then the Mandarin Blueprint actually can do that for you. Oh, yeah. You can acquire it. But for somebody like me who's like, I want to enjoy the journey, I'm going to take those characters slower. I might, like right now, I do at most 7 a day. I think that was my highest number in one day. Yeah. Other than that, I take my time and I basically control the amount of Anki cards I have in one day. Well, but if you need it quick, this can do it.
Job, yeah. So, I mean, there's only so much time in the day. But yeah, there's plenty of people out there who are like, we don't think of it like this because we don't think it's the right metric. We shouldn't say somebody who's full-time studying. Like every day they're spending 8 hours on it. But man, if you spent 8 hours a day on this, I mean, you could get done in less than 3 months.
Well, 3 months is based on 3 months is based on 3 hours a day. we did the calculation,
right.
like as a conservative estimate, if someone put in 3 hours in terms of learning and reviewing, like everything together, they could cover all the materials and have it in a certain stage of Anki, as in their long-term memory, in 3 months.
So one of the things that we wanted to ask about is a little bit more of the specifics. So like the specifics of the system and what it is that you like about it. So, perhaps you could go into, I was thinking, there's a lot of things in our system. There's a number of things you could talk about.
Right.
So maybe if you could try to boil it down to maybe 3 things about the system that you find to be either the most surprising or the things that you find most useful, or just anything that you kind of look at and you go, okay, that thing has made the biggest impact on my interest in this system, or at least progress in the system.
Okay, the first thing is going to be you and Luke. That's primary. If you look at the system and who developed it and why they developed it, that's important. You got Luke, he went self-study and he did that and made mistakes, learned from them. Obviously, you guys both have your credentials. You passed the HSK6. So he's done it that way. You took a different approach. You went to the university. And that was one thing that got me into the Mandarin Blueprint, was that I saw, hey, okay, here's the other guy. Here's Phil. He went to the university. He's got all this research to back this up. This isn't something they just threw together. So number one is trust. You can trust the program because of how it developed. You can look at a couple of different things. 2 guys came together, and here's what you have. The second thing is it totally abandons traditional methods of learning a language, and you learn it naturally. You learn it like a child. Like when people ask me about, oh, you're learning Chinese. Oh, you can speak Chinese. I said, yeah, I can speak Chinese and I can read Chinese about as well as a 3-year-old right now, because that's where I'm at in my journey, and you learn pronunciation first, then you learn characters, you learn words, you hear them all the time. Then right now I'm starting to learn sentences. But the thing about it is once I got to level 13 and I began the sentences, because I had gone through and learned these words and drilled them every day, the sentences were no problem. Do I understand the grammar? Not yet, I don't. But I understand those sentences when I see them. I can put words together. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, that's what this means. Like I can see what this means. I don't understand the grammar rules. I worked for a university for a while, helping kids who were writing, like their graduate papers and stuff, and, putting in comments about the finer points of English. I don't know any of those with Chinese, but I'm understanding how a sentence is starting to go together. That's the second thing. You learn it naturally, and it's a lot easier. You don't even know you're learning it. If you do this program, don't think about sentences. Then once you hit level 13 and you read your first sentence, you will see what I mean. The third thing is the memory palace concept. That's the key. That is the key. I'm at 111. I think I'm at 111 characters right now. I could easily remember 107 of them with no problem. Yes, would I have to recall my memory palace? Yes. But maybe it was in the last podcast, or it might have been in a video that you guys posted on YouTube. Phil had mentioned, with rote learning, you don't have anything to go back to. You forget it, you forget it. You got to go back and write it 25 times again. I don't have to do that. When I forget a letter, I'm like, you know what? I kind of know that word, and I think my brother-in-law was doing this at my garage, and there was this prop and that. Oh yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, it might take me a minute to get it, but I get it. So I would say those are the 3 main reasons why, if you're looking for a program, this is your program. I don't think any other program is going to give you those 3 things. So trust, a natural path to speaking Chinese and a technique that has thousands of years behind it, or I think that's about how long it's been around, and
something like that.
All the new linguistic research that you guys provide. It's key.
Absolutely.
Learning how to do it. Learn how to do the memory palace. Definitely.
So one thing I'm really curious about as well is, have you found that your speed of learning the characters and progressing through the course is increasing as you go through?
Yeah, I know I could go faster. I do. And Ron White said this in one of his videos that I was watching recently. Pardon me?
Ron White's a memory athlete, correct?
Yeah, Ron White is a 2-time USA memory champion. And he said in one of his videos, he said, if you want to increase your speed and get better, you have to trust your memory. I do. I trust it, but there's some days I'm like, don't go too fast. Make sure you really cement these characters. But I could easily do. I don't see why I couldn't do 10 or 15 in a single day.
We find you're an engineer, is that correct? Technician?
No, I'm a service tech. I just work on the cars. That's it.
It's very possible. The reason why I asked is you seem to have a very analytical mind. We've had a few sort of people in that, but very sort of left brain, I guess. I don't know if that's sort of a myth now. But
I mean, my degrees are in a more analytical area, but I don't do anything related to that. I sort of just do. I do something different, just something I enjoy.
One of the things, the reason why I mention that is because over the years we've taught people live directly, many people, and we noticed that there's certain types of people that handle it differently, and it's very interesting to observe that. Like we've had sort of analytical minds, and they tend to take their time more with it, and
that's me.
Not in terms of an anxious sort of way, but just in sort of like, let's make sure I get this right. They're fine with taking
that's how it's with me.
When we had some people that we've had other people sort of on the other end of the spectrum that immediately jump into sort of a very free sort of flow with it and just sort of go, okay, boom, 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 okay, next one, and they progress a lot faster. It's just different styles, So
I think you've mentioned a couple of people, and one guy, I think he sent in an email or something that he did like the 600 characters in like 3 months, and then somebody else did like so many in like a month and a half. I don't know. I don't trust myself enough to do that. I want to make. I don't want to make any mistakes. I want to make sure that don't rush this and have to go back and fix anything. Do it right one time so that you get it.
Yeah. I think that approach is very good. But let me just make for the purpose of like saying the alternative viewpoint on it, just because I think that especially in your position where you're just studying it for the language itself, and you're not particularly worried about how quickly you do it. Like it's not of concern to you. But consider this. So suppose that every day, at this point you understand the method completely. I think it's perfectly reasonable to take your time with it when you don't understand the method yet. But once you completely get how the method works, if you do say, I don't know, you go for some really high goal, like 50 characters a day, right? Well, you probably are going to go a little bit too fast, and you are going to forget maybe, let's say, 10 to 15% of the characters that you put into your Anki queue, put into your Anki queue. Well, that means that you didn't forget 80 to 85% of them, and then Anki is going to solidify them. And so it's kind of like, sure, it's not as meticulous right at the beginning, and you're going to have to go back and fix some things and go back into your memory palace, but the overall speed will definitely be faster, and then you can get to the more advanced content where you're going to get to solidify the characters at a higher layer. So it's like you solidify the characters because you're seeing them in a paragraph, because you're seeing them. And again, I'm not saying that this is what you should do. I think you should keep doing it how you want to do it. I'm just sort of putting forward the alternative is that, if you're rote learning, you have to do what you're saying. You have to. Very.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, and with this, you have the option to just go quickly if you want.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say that with the Mandarin Blueprint, you have to do what I do. If you're somebody who can hit it hard, get 600 characters in 2.5 months. Great, do it. Yes, definitely. If it's gonna get you to your Chinese goal faster, and that's what you want, that's great. Yes, do it. And you have that. That's the great thing about this program is you have freedom. You can choose when you want to acquire that 80%. Do you want to do it in 2 years, or do you want to do it in 3 months? All up to you.
Yeah, that's good. That's video courses, man. It's the way of the future.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say this one last thing about that, which is you get this method, Chad. So you definitely could, if you wanted to, you could smash
and I mean, if there are other people out there that want to get the method, I mean, obviously you have to, do it every day. Don't take, maybe take 1 or 2 days off a week, but don't be afraid to go and do some research on memory palaces. Watch Ron's videos. Go watch some other memory champions just to listen to how they explain memory palaces. And it really took off for me. Once I did that, once I took a day and I said, you know what, I want to learn more about this concept. And I watched some YouTube videos. I mean, you have to run out, buy some books and do extensive research, but just go and watch some of this stuff. And just appreciate it, and then apply all of that to, the Hansa movie method.
Awesome. Yeah. Great advice.
One thing I wanted to ask you about here, just to dig a little bit deeper into the second point that you made there. You said understanding the sentences. You said, I don't understand the grammar, but I understand the sentence. And the reason why I said that warms my heart is because that's how everybody naturally acquires grammar. And grammar is just a word that linguists came up with after they, ex post facto analyzed the language and said, okay, well, there's some structure to how we're speaking language. But even in Chinese, I think Chinese grammar as a field of study is only like 100 years old. So it's kind of, it's a clearly not how we naturally acquire the ability to put a sentence together correctly. The way we do it is we understand sentences, and then eventually we just have a feeling. It's just a feeling, in the same way that, if I'm practicing drums for years and I play the snare drum on the wrong beat, I just feel that it's wrong. I can't articulate to you exactly why. History of jazz, they never used to put the snare drum here. It's just I've listened to hours and hours of jazz, and that's not what they do. It's out of time. It's not the right spot, and that's how it ends up feeling with Chinese. When you just get that mass input of understanding. And I love that. It's like, I understand the sentence. I don't understand the grammar. Good. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the grammar.
I don't understand English grammar. I proved that to myself when I started teaching English, years ago when I first came to China. Someone would say, but why is that word there? And why not in the same order? I was like, homework. That's your homework. I don't know. It's just
when I was helping students with their papers, and it's like I knew when I would read something, that sounds terrible. You wrote it like you would speak it, and it doesn't work. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, and I'd grab a book and I'd be like, oh wait, okay, that's why. And then I'd write it in, and I'll tell you what, I have a book. It's sitting right underneath me. It's called Chinese Verbs and Grammar, and it's tempting not to pick up some days and start reading it to try to understand. But I know if I do that, that's not good. So I'm like, I just got to trust myself. And every once in a while, I'll look up a little something. If I'm having trouble understanding something, I might be like, okay, well, that just kind of cleared up a little fog, but I use it to teach myself grammar. I have to, just kind of trust myself to acquire it naturally. And you really have to discipline yourself to do that.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually one of the reasons why we're working on some of these. We're working on grammar flowcharts with characters and words that you've already learned by certain points in the course. And the reason for that is basically because sometimes it's just, as an adult, you're just insatiably curious about well, why is it this way and not that way? And we encourage people to try their best to still rely on just the mass input, but we get that that doesn't feel as good as looking at like something like a flow chart and going, oh, I see, you know, you can make like 10 sentences with the same structure. And so, you know, we're working on those right now. They're a bit more complicated than we expected, but I like that too, because, you know, that means that they'll be more valuable to people. It's like in terms of just designing them and coming up with ways that are very clear, but, and all the different flowcharts you can make. But I think that that's a good way to kind of satiate that curiosity while staying in the same sort of understandable input realm. You know, it's not like you're reading a rule, you're reading a kind of a formulaic chart sort of. And it's so, you know,
right.
We'll talk about it more. Yeah. We'll bring in some examples in very soon, maybe even next week. Yeah. So awesome.
Okay, cool. So moving on to like another question, you know, when it comes to, you know, you've kind of talked about sort of the results that you've had so far in terms of like specific things. You've learned 111 characters and you're understanding sentences and things like that. But are there any sort of more kind of, I guess, meta results in terms of how you are feeling towards the language? Have you noticed any changes in how it's affecting maybe how you think a little bit? It might be a little early for that, but it's possible. Maybe the memory palace.
No.
Like that. How people are responding to you trying to do this, like anything you want to comment on that in
general impacts. Yeah.
I mean, it definitely starts to shape your thinking a little differently, especially depending on why you're doing it. If you're doing it for yourself, you might kind of, I don't know, sort of opens your mind a little bit, gets you thinking differently, not just about language itself, but, you know, sometimes other things, and wanting to sort of expand from, you know, beyond where you're at, you know, to understand more things. But I think one important thing is, you know, with the pronunciation, that is really key, and that is really going to open things up in the beginning for you. I watch a lot of Chinese movies, television shows, and, you know, being able to correctly hear it has just, I mean, it's worked wonders in sort of acquiring words, you know, that way, not necessarily, you know, acquiring a lot of new vocabulary, but in terms of being able to practice, you just, there's so much more you can do. You know, not a lot of people, well, maybe after this they will, but I don't think a lot of people really know that this is something I'm doing. I have talked to, you know, like the guys at work. In fact, I taught Junior a word. You know, they like to, we like to roast each other. So this is obviously Chinese. That's a good. They like to use that as a joke. But I was like, okay, well, that's funny. But I'm going to show you that you can do this. And so I actually kind of did a little mini like memory palace thing for him. And it's funny because when I ask him now, if I say, you know, what's the Chinese word for 6, he'll tell me. He knows. And he can't forget it. So, but like my family's really supportive, especially my fiance. Let me tell you how supportive she is. I watch so much Chinese television that she can tell the difference between Mandarin and Cantonese. That's how much I watch. And she doesn't even speak Chinese.
Yeah, that's significant. You cannot tell if you don't know anything about either language. So yeah. That's awesome.
She can hear it. She recognizes words. It's funny because she's like, oh yeah, you say that. I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny, but
that's really good.
No, I mean there's definitely a lot of, you know, it's fun. It's definitely been enjoyable, and, you know, definitely changed, you know, some things for me.
I think giving you more access to that. I think that as you develop the language, you're going to get more out of the content you're consuming. I think that's going to be a big thing for you.
Yeah. And so yeah, just I want to make a quick like tangent about Mandarin and Cantonese, because like listening to Cantonese now, like sometimes when I'm watching YouTube on my phone, I'll be on a Hong Kong server on my phone, and so I'll get Cantonese ads.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like I listen to it and I'm like, I feel like I can understand this, but I can't. Like it's like,
right. Yeah.
Like I don't understand this.
Every now and then they'll say like "why may" or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I know what that is.
It's like
or mayo or something like that.
But it's funny how like you listen to it, and I'm sure that if I went to learn Cantonese now, it would be way easier than if I were starting from scratch. But yeah. So moving on.
Yeah, so we got, because we want to be respectful of your time, so we want to keep it relatively structured, Chad, as well. So we know it's quite late over there, or it's getting on. So another question we have for you is, what were you skeptical about? So you've already sort of mentioned that you were skeptical about the 80% in 3 months sort of line, but was there anything else, even when you had already started the course, before you were convinced, was there anything that you were skeptical about, saying, I don't know if this is going to work, or I don't really believe that? Could you go into a bit of detail there?
Yeah, and it wasn't just the claims that were being made, and I'll just sort of as a caveat here, in my life, I've only ever bought 2 products where it said, hey, do this in, such and such a time frame. This was the second one. The one other worked just as well as I thought it would, and this one. But once I signed up, I just did I did the free trial, and I started going through the videos, and you started talking about the movie method. And I'm like, honestly, my first thought was this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. I cannot do this. This is not me. I don't learn like this. I read textbooks and I take notes and I watch lectures, and that's what I do, and that's how I'm going to learn this. And but I kept going, got through those videos. I'm like, all right, look, these guys apparently know what they're talking about. I'm just going to throw it all away, and I'm going to listen to what they tell me to do. I'm simply going to do what they tell me to do, and I'll see what happens. And like I said, it was probably 4 or 5 characters in that I really started to see the difference. But yeah, I was initially skeptical as soon as I got into the free trial that, memory palaces and props and actors, and I got to sit here and assign, people to these letters, and I got to assign sets and pick places is stupid. That's exactly what I thought. Just stupid. I'm not going to do this. Mm-hmm. Here I am 111 characters later, and I can practically remember them all.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Wow, that's like, we get it, we understand it. It's a tough sell, because we're basically being like, hey, only do characters first, which is most.
That's it too.
Courses will be like, no, don't worry about characters yet, because they're going to scare you, and I don't want to scare you.
Right.
And we're big advocates for, get right into them, because you're going to be so happy you did in the future.
Yes.
But it's obviously thinking long term for them, and not necessarily short term. But luckily, the memory palace is fun, so it's like once you get into it, you're like, oh, actually, this is kind of silly and enjoyable.
One of the early videos sorry, go ahead.
And you definitely have to. I mean, honestly, and for people watching, there will be. I've even had times. I don't know if this happened with you guys, but there were a couple of days where, you wanted us to pick an actor for whatever. Mm-hmm. And I seriously would stay here for 20 minutes. Like, is that going to work? No, that actor really doesn't work for me. It's not powerful enough. But I really don't know anybody. Yeah. And then I got a couple actors that, honestly, I'm surprised I remember the character half the time when I have to use them. But I kind of try to picture them in movies that I'm really familiar with. And then that way, if I can kind of remember that character they played, it helps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing to point out. Although, facial recognition, we're amazing at it. We're so good at it.
Yeah.
It's like I had a couple of actors that were like very tenuous relationships, but I did still have a problem by the end. Yeah. I actually built my relationship up with them in my brain.
I chose Indira Gandhi for mine based on a suggestion. And I had to figure out, because I couldn't think of one for I or Y or whatever. And I was like, okay, well,
mine was Z, and I took Billy Zane, and honestly, I either think of him in the substitute with Tom Berenger in the camo and stuff, or from Zoolander. And that's it. That's what I have.
Yeah. I mean, so people I can understand why people get intimidated or skeptical, because it's like, as well as learning Chinese and learning characters, you also have to learn this little mini language as well.
Right.
You know, you have to,
that's not right. And that's not, people might be intimidated by that. I know I was when I started, but it is not as hard as you think it is, because you do have some connection already. You're just simply organizing those connections in your brain. And that's why I had my fiance make that thing, so I could organize my sets in my head and I can see them better, rather than having them be fuzzy when I would pull them up here and there. I organized them so I could see them better in my mind.
Sure. Yeah, that was a great idea. Chad's referring to, and I think we talked about this a couple podcasts ago, the memory, sort of like you created like an Inception like place where you have a road that you walk down that is littered with your past locations, as opposed to, you know, what we just did before, which was go to the place in your mind. Just imagine yourself at your workplace when you were 21, which works, but like it was cool how you did it. Right. And so
I mean, you guys call this the Hans movie method, so I'm like, okay, well, my mind then is a movie production company, and I have sets, and I have a lot, and in this lot, I have 13 areas where I've lived, and I have to put them together, and now I can better see myself going into some of these sets, and it's not like sort of a hazy picture, and I can actually create these movie scenes.
Yeah,
and
that's just like the scene from Inside Out. You ever seen that Pixar movie, Inside Out?
No.
That's a great movie. You should watch it. But there's this moment where they're inside this little girl's brain, and it's the premise of the movie is that her emotions are like personified. You have joy and sadness and anger and whatever. And so joy and sadness are in her dream movie making. Like it's just like a Hollywood movie set that they're walking around of all the different dreams that they're trying to create each night. It was pretty wild. You just reminded me of that by thinking of it as a Hollywood set. So cool.
So something other people can do.
And that's great. So I guess, you know, the final question we would want to ask you here is, you know, would you recommend people try the course?
Yeah, definitely. At least do the free trial. If you're not convinced after the free trial, I don't know what to tell you, because this is the way to go. And one thing I did want to mention, I know we had talked about this right before we got started here, is while you're doing the course, if you can, I'm a beginner Chinese learner, and, you know, this has helped me. You know, if you can't learn by immersion, you know, you can't be in China, create your own Chinese environment wherever you are. There's a lot of great Chinese movies. There's a lot of great Chinese TV shows. You know, use Netflix, Prime, all of that. You can search Mandarin language movies, have them on as much as you can. Make a Mandarin language playlist on Spotify. Listen to it as much as you can. If you are going to do the course, my biggest piece of advice, do the pronunciation course first. Take time and go through that. Make sure before, you know, you start doing the characters and really getting into it, you know how to pronounce the sounds. That's going to make it 10 times easier to get through the course. And while you're going through the course and you've created your Chinese language environment, you have the pronunciation, you will begin to be able to sort of decipher it on TV. If you don't understand it, you will hear words that you're familiar with, and you'll kind of start to get a feel for it like a child would.
Yes.
As you're going through the Mandarin Blueprint, you're going to be learning naturally. Well, you know, when we're growing up, TV's always on, people are playing stuff, we're hearing it all the time. That's really what you have to do as a beginning learner. And then just going through the course, make sure you do Anki every day. And I have a confession, it's 10, 11 at night here. I haven't done my flashcards yet. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to do my flashcards.
Yeah.
That's great advice. And wow, yeah. I mean, sorry, I just had something that I was just thinking. Then you distracted me with Anki there because
because Anki is the good. It's like the greatest and worst application, but overall greatest.
It's a love-hate relationship, isn't it?
Yeah. I had to come up with, watch the tutorials. Take a day. Take one of your days that you're going to study, learn Anki.
Yeah. We've given we put a full like shared Google slide presentation on how to use Anki with the Mandarin Blueprint Method, and it's because Anki is complicated, it's a little bit long, but it's also well worth your time to do it because it will make sure that you remember everything.
Absolutely.
You were gonna say?
Yeah, right. I just remember what I was going to say. So talking about sort of collating listening and watching material, that's a great point, and that is something that never stops, by the way. In order to maintain your interest and zest for this language, and especially if you're out of China, constantly looking and exploring for new Chinese stuff is really important. I'm still doing it. Like, for example, I haven't been much of a reader for a long time, but I'm getting back into reading again. And I'm especially exploring new topics to read. So I've just downloaded all of Isaac Asimov's sci-fi. I've never read sci-fi before, but I've downloaded it in Chinese, and it's really cool. I'm loving it. And maybe in 3 months' time, I'll be done with Isaac, and I'll move on to more listening material, or using different things. So it's always be on the lookout, and that's part of your hobby as well. Not just learning Chinese, but exploring Chinese stuff. That's part of it.
Right. I think one of the big things when I started learning this is one sort of hang up I had was I'm probably never going to get to China. So am I really ever going to be able to learn it? And I can't remember who it was, but they actually said, look, you don't have to go to China to learn Chinese. There's people in China, that have gone over there that never learned to speak it.
That's true.
But if you can create that environment, and that's, sort of what I chose to do. And sometimes it's not easy, especially if you're getting started. Here's one problem that you might come across is they'll say, yes, this movie is in Chinese. Well, then you turn the TV on, you go to watch the movie. It's not Mandarin, it's Cantonese. So people sometimes don't make the distinction between, okay, this is Mandarin and this is Cantonese. Most of your kung fu movies out of Hong Kong, they're in Cantonese. A lot of the action movies, they're out of Hong Kong, they're in Cantonese, unless they dub them in Mandarin. You really have to be specific. Netflix does a great job. Once you watch a few, they will create for you a Mandarin language movies and TV. Detective D, watch that. Brotherhood of Blades, that's my favorite. Those are some good good movies. There's some really good TV shows. It's a little harder on Prime to search for it, but you can do it. Hulu and Vudu, they don't have a large selection. They might have a couple. Like Jet Li movies, or a lot of the Donnie Yen one. If you're a Donnie Yen fan, they're mostly in Cantonese. I got bad news. Ip Man, all Cantonese.
There are definitely Mandarin dubs for it, but that's true.
There are, but if you're on Netflix,
it's tough.
You have to kind of be willing to step outside, watch some new stuff. One other piece of advice. I watched a lot of movies that were obviously set in 200 AD, 600 AD. Make sure you watch some that are set in like 2000, so the vocabulary that you're hearing is sort of up to date. I'm hearing, like, I would look up on Plico, so hearing, and they're probably not even used anymore.
Sorry, there's a show, 武林外传. I'll send you the name of it on the chat here. Because it's set in the ancient times, it's set in a long time ago, but it's using modern language and lots of different dialects as well, and it's very fun. And see,
that would be good.
It's a very good idea.
That's
and dialects as well.
Yeah,
and it's genuinely quite funny.
Getting exposed to different dialects. You might even start hearing some that you like. There's a couple actors, and I like their accent. It's kind of like, well, if I'm going to speak Chinese and I can sort of develop an accent, I think it's like the Arhua accent. I think you guys kind of taught us a couple of words like that, like EDR. I like that. I like that kind of accent, sort of from that northern area. But yeah, I mean, you'll find stuff like that you just enjoy hearing. Just practice it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Chad, throughout this entire podcast, I've been thinking that people need to be more like you in their attitudes. They need to be like Chad. So that's going to be the discount code or coupon code for anybody who wants to get into this course and try it out. Now, of course, we already have the free pronunciation mastery and the free trial Mandarin Blueprint Method. But for the next period of time, how about the next 2 months? We'll have a discount code Be Like Chad. And if you type in Be Like Chad at checkout of the Mandarin Blueprint Method, you will get a nice discount. And the reason why I say 2 months is because we'd like to talk to you again in 2 months, Chad. We'd like to see how you're doing, see what kind of progress you made. And so, keep it up, keep doing it every day. And I bet 2 months from now, you'll have a lot more to say. So this is a great
definitely
to you.
And to anyone listening, if you want to give it a shot, there'll be a link, and go ahead and put in that code when you think you're ready.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. Great.
You will not regret it if you want to actually acquire it and not learn about Chinese, then this is definitely the program for you.
Excellent, Chad. Well, thanks so much. And we'll see you guys on the next podcast.
All right. Sounds good.